Okay, this video has been a long time in the making. I've been using and abusing the Huawei Mate 20 Pro for a month and a half now. This is what you need to know. I love that I can stick it on charge 10 minutes before leaving the house. I love the experimental camera that feels every bit as much of a toy as it is a tool. I love the lightning fast face unlocking that can work a meter away or even when there's no light at all. But as with every phone, when you really spend time getting to know it, you also discover its less flattering side. The Huawei Mate 20 Pro is one of the few phones for which, even after this much time, the design novelty hasn't worn off. It turns out though, it is a delicate bit of kit. I'm pretty careful with my phones, and after less than 2 months, there is obvious damage on the screen and the camera module. And with this phone, I've actually felt the need to use a case, which, credit where due, does come in the box. You could try a screen protector too, but I've gone through about 3 of them, and from everything I've tried, they don't play nicely with the curves of the screen. So you just gotta be careful. On the subject of the screen though, it's generally really good. It's bright enough to view outdoors, rich and sharpened, so that even on the 1080p setting, it looks super crispy. This sharpness makes browsing the web a pleasure, and it gives photos and videos a really defined finish. But it is also one of the phone's main downfalls. It's not representative. So for me, posting photos on social media, you can probably imagine, is crucial. And because this display looks so different, so adjusted compared to most, before posting I actually have to factor in how a photo might look on other phones' screens, as opposed to just seeing what looks good here. Obviously this isn't going to be as much of an issue for everyone, but most people will notice your photos looking different when you transfer them to another phone, or even send them to your computer. It's a good thing then that straight out of the box, the Mate 20 Pro takes amazing photos. The ultra-wide lens, night mode, and AI stabilization when taking videos are novelties that have not worn off. The other things, you could see them as bloat, or you could just see them as a bit of fun. I actually had a really good time not too long ago playing with the light painting mode, and the results were better than expected. I've enjoyed pulling out portrait color mode, and again, this is good enough to be more than just a gimmick. I'd say I'm impressed with 98% of the photos that come from this phone. Detail-wise, it's amazing because of that 40 megapixel sensor. Colors are saturated, but toned down from past Huawei phones, in a good way, and zooming in 3 times optically still feels like a blessing. And just returning to the screen for a second, we gotta talk about GlueGate. This is a problem that a whole bunch of people have been reporting with this phone, wherein the display is not glued on properly, so that when you're viewing the screen in some lighting conditions, you can actually see really obvious yellow stains on it. Now, this is unforgivable, especially for a phone at this price. It's a really bad error to have. But at the same time, it's not been a deal breaker for me, because these stains only really show up when you're using something with a dark background, and you're doing so in very low light. The fact that there isn't a headphone jack on this phone is a shame, but you might know it has a very unique and clever dual speaker setup. The majority of the audio actually comes from behind the USB port, and on one hand I think it's amazing what they've done here, but on the other hand it kind of feels like they're fixing a problem that was never really there. I don't know about you, but I never really had a problem with how the speaker grill looks on most phones, and given the choice, I would definitely take the extra volume that you get on a phone like the Note 9 speaker as opposed to the cleanness you have here. Also not a huge issue, but it does mean that if you're trying to charge your phone whilst also listening to music, it's going to sound pretty muffled because essentially you're blocking the speaker. My love-hate relationship with this phone is embodied with the software experience. The Mate 20 Pro runs on MIUI 9, which I don't hate and actually has some really useful features. It is fast. I regularly use screen recording, and on the few occasions I've wanted to wirelessly project my screen, have been surprised at how simply it works. It's a bit of a shame that notifications are not handled very well. Sometimes you can't dismiss them, other times you can't expand them, and social media apps especially seem to have just one too many bugs. Also, the microphone just isn't very good, which gets in the way when you're trying to do a lot of social media stuff. I gotta make it clear though, that a lot of its nuisances can be forgiven just because of how snappy it is. Even after being used heavily and loaded up with applications, MIUI, first-party apps, and internet browsing are just as snappy as they've always been. Gaming too poses little threat, although it is worth noting that while the Kirin 980 chip here is based on the bleeding-edge 7nm manufacturing process, its graphics processing unit isn't quite as capable as Apple's, or the Android competition it'll be facing early next year. You've probably heard a lot already about battery life on this phone, and I'm happy to say whatever we found out initially has stayed true over the period I've used it. I haven't once felt the need to be remotely careful with battery, which is a change from my last few phones where I would always be keeping an eye on brightness and turning GPS and Bluetooth off wherever possible just to keep them going. I also did not anticipate how useful super fast charging would be. Okay, so when you consider how many things can go wrong with a smartphone, the Huawei Mate 20 Pro sails through these hurdles. It is a slick, stylish phone made for gadget enthusiasts with its Porsche design camera array, its in-display fingerprint scanner, and its twilight gradient finish. This whole GlueGate thing is a serious problem, but at the same time it's not immediately obvious unless you start looking for it. I didn't notice it for the first 4 weeks I was using the phone. And little niggles aside, it nails every fundamental pillar, and even though we've had some amazing phones from Samsung, Apple and Google, this is the relationship that I'm going to be carrying on till 2019. So thanks a lot for watching guys, my name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you in the next one.